Hey y'all, thanks for joining us for another episode of 911 Delta, Tethered for Life. This podcast may not be suitable to all listeners due to language and subject matters. Please listen with care. We're discussing issues with mental health this week, so if you have any questions or concerns, if you think that you need to get some help, find a doctor or a counselor that can help you. We are not any of those things. We are just trying to get the word out and make this a mainstream, talk-aboutable issue. We really want you all to live the best lives that you possibly can. So take care of yourself. Put your own oxygen mask on first. Hey y'all, welcome to episode 3 of 911 Delta, Tethered for Life. I'm Anna.
And I'm Casey, and y'all, we're super excited that on today's episode, we have our first guest.
Hey guys, I'm Emmalie.
I cannot believe we have done this 3 whole times now. Case, I know it's Emily's first time, but 3 whole times.
Yes.
It's our 3rd episode, and we have an amazing audience that keeps growing. So keep sharing us, y'all. We've had 150 plays last I checked on Spotify, with 38 listeners. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And you know what they say? 3rd time's the charm. And the topic and name of today's episode is Who Said the Q Word in My Head? And for those of you in public safety, know the quiet word always means the opposite. So what is going on in our brains, especially when we're not at work?
Usually in my brain, it's like 8,000,001 things about kids. And then, oh shit, I forgot to do that.
Yeah, in my brain, we'd need a hell of a lot more than a podcast to dive into that.
More than we need, like, I don't know. What was that? What's that Dixie Chick song? You know, we need like 23 podcasts at least.
Yeah, I'm with y'all. I'm the same.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
So is that the dispatcher condition, or did we condition ourselves to be that way because of that? I don't know.
I think it's a little of both. I don't know. Now that I've hung up my headset, my head's kind of is really quiet, like not the opposite. So I'm simmering down some, so I like it.
Yeah, I think the conditioning definitely.
Yeah. I haven't totally hung up my headset yet, and I'm not simmering down yet. I wish I could simmer down, but we'll talk about that.
Well, before we get into some of this deep shit, y'all, Anna, how was your week?
Oh, it was Halloween week.
Yes, you worked on full moon. So how was that?
I did. Surprisingly not too bad. Now, I did leave at 1:00. So if anything, nothing good happens after midnight. We actually had a stabbing and shooting and somebody getting beaten over the head at the same time in 2 different places in the county, of course. After midnight. And then what happened after 1, I don't know. I was like, let the force be with y'all. But otherwise, it was pretty Q word. But then, of course, trying to get children and their costumes to be exactly how they want them to be, especially when they change their mind every day.
Yeah. It was hard for me to get Maxwell in his costume.
Oh my goodness!
He fought me every step of the way.
Well, 5 pounds.
Yeah.
That's smart.
What was he for Halloween?
He was a spider. He
nice.
was an obnoxious spider.
Nice.
Yeah, I sent that to some people who don't like spiders.
Yeah. That's pretty funny. Like, you just go into their houses and just like shoot them through the door.
He came at the door when we had the little trick-or-treaters coming by. He was not messing around. I do have a Chucky costume for him too. He has like a little knife. Yeah, that's a good one too.
I took my kids to my grandma's nursing home, and there was somebody there with probably like a 3-year-old in the Chucky outfit, They had the little freckles on this kid's face. He had a little knife. Hilarious.
That's cute.
Yes.
That's cute.
It was pretty hilarious.
I do miss those days.
And you were a glutton for punishment working on Halloween, huh?
Well, I didn't work on Halloween. I worked on Saturday, which was the full moon.
Oh, that's even worse.
I know. I know. And, luckily, it's so funny, though. I feel like the full moon is busy with dumb shit, right? Like, people are crazy. But the new moon, I feel like, is when, like, the big crazies happens. Like, it was all just, people off their rockers, I mean, I had some lady, she was hollering, and the lady across the street was hollering at her because the lady on the phone claims that the lady across the street blows her leaves all the way across the road into her yard. They mow, and when they mow their grass, it goes all the way across the road into their yard.
First world problems, man.
And did that bitch call 911 for that?
Oh, she did.
Of course she did.
She did. Yeah. Yeah. So that's not a reason to call 911, people.
Definitely not.
Your landscaping woes is not it.
Definitely
not.
HOA.
And they should have learned that in episode 1 because we've been through this.
Right. And on top of that, like, first of all, I mean, it's really, there's way more important things that you can be worrying about. Right. And second of all, if somebody like accidentally does some landscaping on your land, I got a flower bed, somebody can come clean out if they want to. Like, come on. It's not that big a deal. But
definitely not.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was my craziness. I was glutton for punishment. I did not check the calendar before I took pity on because they needed help. Lesson learned, but I didn't check the calendar. But it wasn't too bad. And the worst part, let me tell you, was getting into the office because they had shut down both roads that lead to the back for the trunk or treat.
Oh,
and then they had some little new dude at the intersection. He's probably in the academy. And I'm like, I'm trying to get to work. And he's like, I'm like, dispatch, you know that place. And he's like, oh, okay. So then he like gets to moving his cone, right? And he's waving me through. And I guess somebody probably assumed that he was an idiot. And this is somebody been with the department forever. And so like he starts walking up and my window's still down and he's like, oh shit, I didn't know it was you. He's like, get the fuck out of here. And I'm like, I'm trying. I'm trying. And then of course, because I went in at 5. So then the regular shift changes at 7, right? And they were all like, it was like nobody knew they were going to be coming to work. I don't know. Yeah. So it's, the government, everybody knows what everybody's doing.
Yep. I don't miss it.
Yeah.
I don't miss it either.
Yeah.
Did you like the state or the not state, but like local government or the federal government better there, Em?
Again, another conversation for another podcast.
Right. Well, thank you for coming on because the stresses of the job and you left because of it. So now you're studying how to keep these issues happening from others.
Yes.
Or happening to others. So tell us more about you.
So thanks for having me on, guys. It really means a lot to me. I'm really enjoying the fact that you guys seriously put together this podcast. I don't think it's talked about enough. I do like to just kind of reiterate that I'm no doctor nor a medical professional whatsoever. I am a student of psychology and biology and neuroscience. I live in Charleston, South Carolina now. I lived in Virginia pretty much my whole life, but and I dispatched for about 6.5 years in 2 different agencies. But yeah, so studying mental health, neuroscience, and the way that the brain really works is my thing.
Awesome. So I totally get it because I've been doing this a long time. And I think I was lucky in the sense that my first marriage, which I think we talked about a little bit in the first episode, Case, but
Yep.
That ended and my ex had PTSD issues, and so I learned a lot, and I actually worked with a psychologist during that period, and I started to learn about it. And then when I came into public safety, I had a sort of a better understanding, and I've just sort of always kept looking into it. 2020 was kind of a crazy hard year for everybody, and that made me look at it even more. And then it also, the fact that now I have 2 kids, because coming out of like babyhood is its own trauma. And I think there's a lot of women that probably don't ever recover from that. So that's another reason that I'm big into this, and big into people, taking charge of your own mental health, because nobody's going to do it for you.
Yes. I feel the same way too. I didn't really think about mental health all through my years of dispatching until like probably the last year actually. And I guess for myself, I just pushed everything down, down, down. And you just become numb to like life in general. Like I feel like I wasn't even really living towards like the end. And I was tired and, just working night shift. I was exhausted. I was starting getting sick. But now that I've hung up the headset and I'm in a different profession that's still in the kind of the same lane, I'm really focused on myself and my mental health. I've started going to counseling, which is just awesome. I'm really enjoying it, and it's helping a lot. So I'm trying to get those things that I've pushed down out, or at least some a little bit of closure, at least, because some of those really tough calls never really got the debriefing that was needed or checked on. It just, so you just have to move on. But and with it. Yeah. And with that said, like, tell us a little bit like what you're studying and what are your plans after you graduate?
Yeah, definitely. I study neuroscience, so I study the ins and outs of the brain and why we do things. Really, honestly, my end goal is to keep the conversation going. It's not, we have a mental health crisis and everybody talks about that and that it's a crisis, but do they actually talk about the situation itself? Like keep the conversation going. So in the long run, I actually do want to study more PTSD, post-traumatic stress, and keep the conversation going. Like I said, I dispatched for 6.5 years, and they were some pretty hard years. Hard. Like I was a changed person after those years. And
Yep.
again, my goal is to work at the hospital in the research department, to really study the PTSD side of everything.
Cool. And I can tell you, like, you know, I don't want to offend anybody, but I'm that kind of person who will just say shit even though people don't want to hear it. But I noticed like your change, Emmalie, because I knew you from, and I don't know if Casey did or not, from when you were a baby dispatcher and then came through the hell. And I'm like, and when I left and then came back part-time, I didn't really totally leave, but was like on maternity leave. And I'm like, man, you can just tell when people are it's starting to get under their skin.
Definitely. And
Yeah.
Casey, you kind of touched on this, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. Casey, you touched on this and not getting the closure or even the follow-up from, different people asking if, you're okay. It's kind of just assumed. And that that hardened me. I'll never forget. I'll never forget coming home most nights, and I did a mix of both, mostly nights, but and I'd have to like I'd have to watch everything that I was doing, every little sound that I heard. I had to, explore it and see like what was going on. And so like I was taking things from the job because when you're on that headset, you have to listen intently, and so it follows you home. And I agree. It was just because 6.5 years, it's nothing compared to Casey. You're long, or Anna, doing your thing, but it felt like I was there for 30 because with all the mandatory overtime and just like you said, Anna, just taking one for the team and kind of going in and helping out when needed, because why not?
Yeah.
Right. And when you feel, you feel like there's a sense of loyalty to the people, your friends. I mean, even if they're not necessarily your friends like that you hang out with outside of work, they're your comrades at work, and you form this community. And so you feel a sense of loyalty to them, even if you're not loyal to the people that you work for, which I think most of us probably are a little bit, just because like when you're in that public safety world, even the people on the street, law enforcement, fire rescue, like you feel a little responsible for them too. And then so that just kind of makes you loyal, at least to the agency a little bit,
Absolutely.
even if you're not like approving of what the head shed and the powers that be are doing, you're still loyal to your people, and you don't want to ever leave them hanging. So yeah, you're going and you're helping out, and then you're burning out. And what I have just really recently, probably within the last year or so, what I noticed is that I really think that it's not that they don't care, or they don't, it's not like there's necessarily an apathy towards us, even though like we perceive that. But I really think it's just a lack of education, because
Absolutely.
I was never taught the things that I have learned outside. And I remember even with my first husband, I was still going through that a little bit when I started working in dispatch. And I remember researching PTSD and like all the stuff that you see as like the symptoms, and that stuff is so far down the road. When I like was meeting with the psychologist, and he was starting to ask me questions like, well, have you noticed this, or did you notice that, and like things that he had been doing. And I'm like, well, shit, I mean, a year ago we were trying to put a deck on the house, and my dad's like, you need to put the bolts, just like this, like a five of cards, right? Just and this was an intelligent man who had graduated from college. I mean, he was in military intelligence when he was in the army. This was when he worked for the federal government. And he was blankly staring at him like, I don't know what you're talking about. And my brother actually ended up just going and doing it because it was like so. And I'm like, and I got to the point where I was like, you're just being a jackass. Like, you're hanging around your buddies too much. I don't know, but you're being a jackass. You know better. Like, you're smarter than this. Come to find out, his brain wasn't functioning properly. So, but that's never been taught to me in any dispatch class. I mean, what is it like? What in Com Basic, what do you get, like an hour class on dispatcher stress or something?
Yeah.
I mean, does anybody remember? Like,
I don't even remember what the fuck we learned, to be honest. I don't think we learned much of nothing.
I took a dispatch judo class once, and it's
right,
like
verbal judo, yeah.
how to like combat stuff and like deal with difficult callers that stress you out. But that was about it. I think I still have the certificate. 10 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, and
that's another thing.
I've sat through plenty of at conferences, dealing with dispatcher stress, blah, blah, blah. I've read some of the books that have been put out, and I'm just like, this is not day-to-day information. Like, this is not helping us day to day, and it's not helping our families either.
Right. Well, especially if you're not having any symptoms or think that you are having any symptoms yourself or around people. I mean, because, we're pretty much all the same when we're there at work. Everybody's at high stress levels. Everybody deals with it and pretty much the same way. I mean, it just doesn't really affect you anymore after. Like when I first started dispatching, I would live off of that adrenaline rush of like the really shitty calls, and it's like, yes, we got it, this and that. But then like after so long, it's like, shit, this shit really fucking bothers me now. And that's the way it got for me towards probably the last 2 or 3 years, the last year being the worst. But I also had a lot of shit going on at home too. Like my dad was really sick with cancer and stuff and passed away. So, I mean, I was dealing with a lot of other things other than work, but it just got to be too much.
The conversation needs to be talked about with that too. It's exactly that. That's exactly it, Casey. You should not have been put on the back burner, expected to do your job when you have such a awful thing happening at your own home. Like, how can you help others when, others aren't, like, when you can't help yourself? So it's
right.
So not to harp on that, but I think that you shouldn't be like, well, I had this going on. No, you had this going on and nobody was there to hook you up.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean,
that's my little.
I know, as essential workers, I know it is, you're supposed to be there, and I totally got that. And that's why I did feel so bad. Just like, Anna says, these folks depend on you to be there, and, you don't want to leave anybody else hanging or make somebody else have to come in your place. So, I mean, it's just a lot of shit that goes through your mind.
Yeah. Definitely. And it was funny. I told this to somebody at work on Saturday, actually, but there was a horse trainer guy that I listen to. He has a podcast as well. And he has this theory with the horses, that's called the 13 rabbits theory. And so like, somebody will come up. He does a lot of like they're kind of like horse conferences, expos, where, people can come and watch demonstrations and hear lectures and things like that. He does a lot of that kind of stuff. And people will come up to him and say, well, I don't really understand. My horse isn't afraid of rabbits because, like, we go out on the trail and we, 2 or 3 rabbits jump across our path and there's no problem. But, we get to, rabbit 13 and he flips out. Right. And the theory is like, it's not the 13th rabbit. It's that horse is ramping up its nervous system with every rabbit and it's never coming back down. So then it just, gets to a point where it explodes. And the same with people, if you have all of this stress for your day to day, just your work, and then you're adding something like, a family illness or a death or, anything like that on top of it, relationship issues, divorce, whatever, like that's just boom, like that's just another thing. And if we haven't taken time to deal with the day to day, it's almost too late when you get to that point, or it's such a big job,
Right.
Yeah, I think
it's almost.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Em.
No, go ahead, Case. I was gonna say something.
I was just gonna say that it's almost like everyone, like management, that type thing, or higher ups, forget that we're human. Like, I know we have a job to do, and we always did it, but at the same time, at the end of the day, we're human, and
Yeah, Case, I'm glad you spoke, because I was gonna say we are human, and with humans we have these chemical processes like going on within our bodies. And again, this is what I've been studying for the last 4.5, 5 years, and we have these chemical processes that aren't thought about. You just do the things that you're doing throughout your day, and you don't think about the inner workings of what's going on in your body. It's very similar to, that I really like that 13 rabbit theory. That's actually really cool. And
Isn't that good?
I'm gonna use that because it actually speaks to like humans' cortisol levels. And cortisol is the primary stress hormone in our bodies. It deals with everything that we go through. And if you have high cortisol levels, you have high blood pressure, you have fatigue and depression, irritability. So you have all these things that you don't even think about. Is you think you're just tired. You just think you had a bad nap, or you need something to eat.
You need a nap.
But it's yeah. So people don't think, like, when you're in, like, whether you think it's high stress or not, your body is going to fight or flight, and it's gonna do what it's gonna do. So when you're dealing with all those issues, you gotta check on yourself and your body, and get some rest, get some good sleep, right? For all those dispatchers.
Right. And
yes.
if you can't sleep. Yeah, if you can't shut your brain down, you can't sleep. And then the cortisol just keeps pumping, and there's no end to it. And
exactly.
That's why, like, in the 13 rabbits, like that, and what you mentioned about fight or flight, that's the parasympathetic nervous system, which we were probably all taught in biology class, right? And horses, they're mammals. What science has been showing recently is that, pretty much mammals respond like mammals, and we are a mammal, right? So we have a few maybe higher brain functions, but for the most part, we all respond in the same way. And there's a great book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. It's a lot of information. It's not an easy read, but they're like, the theory there is that zebras, they're doing their thing, eating grass all day, chilling, whatever. A lion comes out, they freak out, they run away, they get away from the lion, or their buddy gets dead from the lion. Whatever happens, right? And then they go back to their normal, they may have a period of mourning if somebody did die or whatever, because research is showing that happens, but then they go back to eating grass and chilling out and being with their friends. And so they come back into the parasympathetic nervous system. But when you're in a position where you never know what's going to happen when that phone rings or that radio keys up, do you ever come back?
I'd say no, in my opinion. I think dispatchers, call takers stay in that fight or flight mode the entire shift.
So we work 12-hour shifts. So you are in that for 12 hours, which is already outside of your normal circadian rhythm, right? Like,
yes.
Yeah. So
yes.
you're already jacking your body up. So just that alone, and then you start adding more rabbits on top of it. And
again, yeah, it's like a recipe for disaster. It's and to just kind of lean into that circadian rhythm, I think I forgot to mention that cortisol is like your circadian rhythm. It's just like your sleep cycle. So if you do not get sleep, and Anna, you're talking about this, if you do not get sleep, you will continue to just produce this cortisol that continues to keep your stress levels high. And I was actually just reading this brilliant paper about cortisol and in Holocaust survivors, actually. And they were talking about how, and again, speaking about a recipe for disaster, they were talking about how even 50 years after the Holocaust, these folks were still experiencing PTSD or like stress situations. Some were still even cooking in their basements after the Holocaust, like still doing these things. And this doctor wanted to know why. And it's literally just the trauma of it, re-experiencing that. They just feel like they're going to experience it every day. And so they did research and studied and figured out that when if the hormone environment is perfect at the time of a trauma, you will be more likely to develop PTSD. So there, I mean, and again, hormones and all this scientific talk, again, if anybody has questions, please use your resources. But that your body's working significant ways. It's like incredible.
Yeah, and I think like that's the hormone environment is huge because when your circadian rhythm is off, when there's so many little things that can throw off your hormone levels. I mean, vitamin and mineral deficiencies, which if you're not getting enough sunlight, if you are getting too much light because you're working a 12-hour night shift and the freaking lights are on all night.
Boo.
Right. Boo. It's too much light. Like those little things, they seem maybe stupid, but those little things mess up the vitamin and mineral balances in your body, which mess up the hormones. And then you get into this. And like my thing with that paper and people, Holocaust survivors, like I'm sure that they never really were able to get out of that sympathetic state. And I think most, especially most Americans today, live sort of in that state of sympathetic nervous system arousal. Because, like, the thing is, you're always in a hurry. You're always trying to get things done. This hustle, 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 and there's not that time to let down. And I'm guessing, I don't know, I may have known this at some time, but I'm going to ask you, Emily, because you put the research out there. If this cortisol, is that regulated during REM sleep, or does that matter?
I'd have to look a little bit more into that. That's a great question though.
Because there's,
I don't know.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that are, I mean, REM is important. And so if you're not able to get that because you can't shut your brain off, then it's this, it's just the perfect shitstorm.
Yeah.
So
I mean, and there's a lot of things that go into the production of cortisol as well. So I don't want everybody to just think you only produce it when you sleep. I mean, cortisol is literally being pumped through your body every day, all the time. And it's our response. It helps manage our response to stress. So it's not just a nightly thing.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, I mean it is. But what happens is when it's activated over and over again, it's sort of, you kind of get to a level where you're staying at that level and not ever going back to like normal. And then, every little thing ramps it back up. So for me, I mean, what did you guys feel like I've done some research on this, but I'm going to ask you guys just off the cuff, like, what do you think would have, on the floor day to day, what would make a difference?
So on the floor day to day, honestly, people get their smoke breaks, their 10 minutes or what have you. So
every fucking hour.
I'm not saying like smoke breaks, but I'm saying like rooms, I guess a stress room, to like just go and relax. I know that sounds kind of corny, but on the day to day, on the floor, I think if somebody has just handled a very stressful call, I think they would need someplace to go that is calming, I guess. You know, again, it sounds cheesy, but people need
Actually,
that. Like,
it's not, and from the agency, you know, that we worked at, we had that. Like we got that. You weren't there anymore, but we had that. But the point of being able, like, to be able to actually go and utilize it, you know, I mean, sometimes you could do it when you work night shift if shit wasn't popping off, but like day shift folks, I mean, they're really, can you really get up from your desk at day shift when the phones are blowing the fuck up? No, you can't.
that makes my heart happy that they
Um,
implemented something like
but
that.
it was a very nice room, very nice setup. But even those really nice, expensive massage chairs that do the whole body, I mean, it was awesome. But again, not everybody, unfortunately, is able to utilize that on shift. So,
Yeah. And I think too, you have the problem of peer pressure, and then also our perception of judgment. When you would, if you wanted to go do that. So, you know, that plays into it. I mean, that actually that's another rabbit. Right now we're adding more stress because I know I need to go take a break, but can I?
Right. What
Should
if
I?
something does pop off? I mean, because you never know.
Right, you know. And it's really interesting. Research has shown that memories from shared experiences start to diminish within 24 to 48 hours because the memory proteins start to denature in our body. But and this can be great for negative experiences and not so great for positive experiences, except that we tend to relive our negative experiences more often than our positive ones. So if you had, and I'm not even going to say a tough call, because I don't think that, I'm of the mind that the tough calls aren't the dispatcher killers. It's the landscaping calls. Sometimes they turn into tough calls, but for the most part, you know, those stupid calls are the ones, because that's like another rabbit, right? Like,
It's frustrating.
you don't need to be on my phone.
Going. Yeah.
Why are you here? This is dumb. Get a life, move on. So now you've added another rabbit, and I'm replaying that and just remembering like the ridiculousness of this human. And somebody may say something, or, you know, maybe something cool happens, or, you know, you get like a baby born, or, you know, something like that. And then it's like, oh yeah, well, that's normal. That happens. The lady calling about the landscaping is normal too, but like my brain is stuck in that reel. So I think that that's really interesting. And so like some of the research was just saying that you need to remember, like, the community needs to be very active in talking about the good things, the happy things that happen, you know, even if they're not necessarily related to work. Like, even if it's just like, oh, you know, so and so's kid got married, or so and so had a kid, or, you know, Casey found a new job, woo, whatever. Like, just reliving, like talking about the positive things, instead of dwelling on the dumb things.
Yeah.
And then I think educating, because also with the nervous system regulation, that needs to be done pretty quickly after you've gotten, you know, after your 13th rabbit, right? You need to be back down to, 1, 2, 3 level pretty quickly for your best psychological outcome. So, but nobody tells anybody that, all these, critical incident stress management teams, or, things, statewide teams that come in when you have, deaths or something like that. That's all post traumatic, right? That's all when we're talking about PTSD. Like, how can we avoid even getting to that point? And
I'm
right.
actually that's a great segue into what I'm actually writing a research paper right now about that, and how and the ways of prevention, really, and and prevention of PTSD, and really, unfortunately, PTSD is going to happen. It's when you're exposed to a trauma and you have it like almost like a reoccurrence, and you think that it's going to happen again. It's just flashbacks, dissociation. You just feel it. So in my paper, I'm actually discussing ways to have the conversation. Again, it all goes back to talking about it. And I read a couple articles about how, again, going back to, because everybody talks about military PTSD, of course, and they actually have simulators that put these military members in situations, and they have to deal with, like, figure out what's going on and then talk about it afterwards. So it's actually not putting them in actual physical combat right away. And so then they'll go back and they'll talk to them and see what happened, like what their brain was doing when they were going through this like simulator. So I think obviously on a dispatcher side, we can't necessarily do that. But again,
But we
like you were
could,
saying,
right?
yeah,
that could be part of training.
Simulations, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of do simulations, but we don't do them like that. We do them to test your skills, not to test your mental.
When I was working for one agency, not the longest one I worked for, but another agency, they actually made us sit through dispatch calls of very, very traumatic calls that these dispatchers would take. And again, this is all for, I had already done some 911 dispatching work prior to this, but this was all to get to kind of weed out, I guess you could say, but also to get people thinking, like, this is what you're going to be dealing with. Can you handle it? And that's almost like that's as close to a simulation as I've received.
Right.
Because again, it kind of tests your boundaries. It tests what you can deal with. And if you can't handle that and you feel something about it, then maybe this isn't something that you can handle. And again, it's all about the conversation.
Yeah. And if you can't have that group at your agency or whatnot, which I would love for folks to write in or let us know, like, what kind of stuff, debriefings, that kind of thing their agencies have. But like for teams that they put together, if you don't have folks on that team that people who they can trust, it's not going to fucking work anyways.
No.
So, I mean,
well, and
so that was always an issue for me. Like, I'm not talking to nobody on this shit because I don't trust that it's confidential, like, no. Well, and I don't want to be labeled as a true crazy person. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to anybody, but I mean, who wants to be that employee that's like, oh my God, she can't handle shit, and that's exactly how you would be made to feel.
Yeah, that's not fair. I think that it's exactly, again, this platform you both have created is incredible to have this discussion, because it really is. And like you were saying, people write in, call in, or do what they need to do to ask you questions and give their perspectives, because every agency is different.
Yeah, and we would love to. Hopefully somebody will. I mean, we've had a couple folks reach out, and
hopefully. I mean, I know, yeah, I totally agree. Yes, people need to reach out. We need to have the conversation. We need to educate the people that are in the comm center with you. And I mean, start with the supervisors, but like everybody. And then I think the same goes for families. Like they need to know what they need to look for.
Yeah.
And there's, from working with people and horses, and people a lot of times have very traumatic experiences with horses, unfortunately. But, one of the things, or a few of the things, is like just mitigating that when it, like, right when it happens. Like simple things like if somebody's having a panic attack over something, give them something to eat or something to drink, get them up, take them for a walk. There are people who are really good at knowing what they need to do to regulate themselves and will do it. But there are people who don't have a clue because they've never been in this environment before. They've never been taught how to deal with these things before. Not only do they need help, but then even if you know what you should do, you also need the permission. You need that person, that supervisor, whatever, to say, hey, let's go for a walk.
Yeah.
And not give you
And
a chance to say, don't say, do you want to go for a walk? No, let's go for a walk. I'm going to get you something to drink. That's way more. And I've seen it. My husband is a firefighter and has supervised quite a bit. And I've seen him do it. I know it works. Like, and it's really simple. But just that little bit of, come on, we got to get out of here, even if it's for 5 minutes. And I realize that places are understaffed, but we have to take care of ourselves, because like Emily said in the beginning, if we can't take care of ourselves, can't take care of anybody else. So it's just
That's
like
right.
when you're flying, you got to put your oxygen mask on first and then do somebody else's, So ladies, we've been going for a little bit, not too long. So do you want to throw out some shitty calls and maybe talk about
I mean,
what
I've got
what might have helped you? Or I mean, maybe you need help right now. We can just air it out.
why should I need a lot of fucking help, but
I mean, I know you do.
in more ways than one. And actually, I was just talking to my therapist yesterday, as a matter of fact, at my appointment, about things that, even though I've been out of dispatching now for a whole year, things, even though I'm in a way happier place, I'm doing really good for myself. Like things are really starting to come back up for me in certain calls. And we talked about them a little bit yesterday. One was a nurse calling in from a hospital where it was a homicide, like suicide homicide deal, where the husband shot his wife and because she was ill, and then he took his own life. And I don't know what it was about that nurse's voice. I mean, I guess because it was legit, she was scared for her fucking life. That bothered me. And even though I handled it and it was done and I moved on, it's like now today talking about that, and like, just, I don't know what it was that made me even think about it. I mean, I don't know. But that's been sticking in my mind here lately. And then the horrible call of the dad going to find his, ex-wife or girlfriend, whatever it was, his kid's mom, and she's dead. The kids are dead in that house. I'm pretty sure you guys know which call I'm talking about. That was, even though I didn't actually take that call, I mean, but I was there working, and I just can't imagine. I don't know. It's just awful. And those were a couple of the more serious ones. And then, of course, we had an officer that died in a boating accident. That was like in my younger times, like early times of dispatching. That I think that was the only time I actually got a debriefing. And I was super new at dispatching then, so I really didn't quite get it. And I felt like because I was on that, oh, I'm cool. Like I don't need this, But now I'm like, yeah, bitch, you needed that. Like, and you need it still now, like from that call. And um, so those were the few that jumped out at me yesterday in my therapist appointment. So
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
I think the voices, and probably because that's what we know. I mean, I can, you know, firefighters, law enforcement officers, whatever, like I can hear them talk and I know who
Mm-hmm.
they are, like not even I've
Oh
never seen
yeah.
them before in my life.
Yes.
Voices. I mean, one, and this, boy, I don't want to make this sound like it was not an important call, but it wasn't something that was long in trauma or like weird. Like, so one night shift change, and you might have been working with me then, Casey, I don't remember. And for, whatever reason, a shift change, the phones are always blowing up. I mean, I don't know. But so I'm like just logged into the phone and I'm like, 911, what's the address of the emergency? This lady, clear as day, a little creepy, is like, there's a body behind this church. And clicka, hung up. And I'm like, my first thought is, look, I am not in the mood for these mother trucking kids tonight. Okay. And but the cell phone rebid like bam right there. And it was something in her voice. And when I called the number back, straight to voicemail, straight to voicemail, straight to voicemail. And I tried multiple times, and I'm not usually like that. You don't answer me on the first try, I don't care. But I was like, So sent a deputy out there. Sure enough, she had committed suicide. About that time, my partner is taking a call from somebody who wants a welfare check on their daughter. And I'm like, because what's her cell phone number? And she writes the cell phone number down for me. And it's still on my caller ID. Like that's how close together those calls had happened. Wow. And I'm like, and then of course she's freaking out because she's like, oh, I'm gonna tell her.
Yeah.
And but that, and just that sound in her voice was like, that's not,
That gives
so
me
yeah, I mean,
goosebumps actually.
it can be little things. Like, I mean, I want to say that that's little, but as far as in the, did you work that incident where the guy, they went to serve a warrant and he barricaded himself and then he set the house on fire? And did you work that?
I think so. I think that does.
That sounds familiar to me. Was that
familiar.
recently?
Like that was long and drawn out.
Yeah.
I don't really have much, like that doesn't stick with me really, other than, there was a moment when maybe somebody was going to be trapped in the house with him, but like, otherwise I was like, and that went on for hours.
Yeah.
But that,
it's weird how it does that to you. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and then agonal breathing to me, guys, that shit just, I fucking hear that shit all the time. That creeps me out like a lot. Mm-hmm. And I know it's a natural thing. I mean, I heard my dad's when he was passing and I was fine with it at that moment. But now to like think about hearing that over and over so many times, that shit just not good. I don't know. It just creeps me out.
Yeah, I seemingly answered a lot of those phone calls too. I will never get that sound out of my head either. And it's funny because you say, and I say funny, relative. You say that it's kind of silly where these voices are all that you think of, like, but that's all we hear. as dispatchers. It's literally the noises on the phone that literally just you have to listen to, and every little one, no matter what it is on that line, you hear it, and it just sits with you. And it might resonate in one area. Like you said, it might be like that barricade situation where you're like, I don't really remember, but I remember it. Or obviously agonal breathing and all this other stuff. But when that's all you have to go off of, you know. So
Right. That's a good thing about being married to my husband, because you know, he just calls it guppy breathing.
That's another thing. Like, I mean, it's
so, you know, so we can laugh about it. You know,
Right.
again, not cool, but it is what it is. You gotta do what you gotta do.
Oh, it's
right?
real. It's real life. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And we talked about a little bit on our first episode how that's one of the ways dispatchers, call takers cope with this.
Anybody in public safety.
Humor.
Right?
I mean, it's just a dark humor, and it is what it is. We need no disrespect to the families, victims, whatever. It's just, if you can't do that, then there'd be a lot of more fucked up people sooner than years down the road. It would happen.
Yeah, and you know,
sooner,
now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, well, we're trying to like create, our mind's trying to create, you know, something, you know, a happy thing to put with that, so that we can remember the funny things. See, now y'all think about guppies all the time.
Now you said remember, that makes me think of that. Do you remember? 21st night of September. Just like we're in the comm center, right, guys?
Yeah, I love it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's another thing, you know, and it all falls back on that. You know, we all deal with our traumas in certain ways, and like you said, dark humor, but you know, it really is a family in the comm center, and dealing with it, and you're like in the shit together for 12 hours at a time, and we're, you know, talking about this now, and others need this, you know, others need this conversation. I think it's incredible, and there's so much more to talk about.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
So it's, but again, you know, it's like a family in that comm center, and you're always there for them, whether you want to be or not. You're there.
And you end up knowing how each other's works, what makes someone tick, what, you know, if they know that they're not going to be able to handle it, you jump in. It's like, it just rolls. It's just awesome. So yeah, you definitely get friendships. And look, like, we haven't all worked together in how long, and here we are. It's like, and this is the whole point of this podcast, that when we put it together, it's like, this is one of the main things. We want it to be an outlet for folks that, you know, just need to listen, or I don't know, to interact with us. I mean, that's what we're really hoping for, but so far.
Yeah, because, you know, it's, there's so much, like Emily said, it's a family, but the whole thing, all of us are a community, and, you know, we should have each other. And, you know, talking about crappy calls, the Mayday that I worked the night we were understaffed, had major freaking storms. And I can tell you, is the only time in my career to date that I've thought that I might actually have a panic attack. And I had to go, take a breath. You know how to do this. And then just roll with it, right? And the people who reached out to me were not in the comm center. I mean, the four people that were in there, the four of us, we all got through it. And yes, it was family, and you know, it was all like, you know, you rocked it. We all got it done, whatever. But outside of those four people, the only other people that reached out to me was the firefighter who had command of the scene, and another firefighter who was not even on scene, who was not even there, who just worked for the department. And that we're still like, one of them was a friend of mine from before, but the incident commander, I didn't know him from Adam before that night. We are still friends. Um, you know, and it was just, we both had this moment of, oh shit, this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
And that, has just brought us together. And the fact that he, reached out, and, nobody else did that. So I think that's huge. I think people need to know that, yes, reaching out to each other is important. And just treating each other like family, not like, the asshole next door who blows their leaves into your yard.
Yeah. I also worked a May Day when I was a baby dispatcher, and this was actually, goodness, I couldn't remember if we were in what building we're in, but I know it was a crazy time, and I don't think I don't think I ever fully recovered as when I was a dispatcher, when I was a baby dispatcher. I don't think I ever fully recovered from that because it was very real. Um, and I think we had a little bit more than 4 people in the room when we were dealing with it. But
Well, you
at
were
the
lucky.
time,
Right.
I know, at the time, it was so surreal and it was so real. It was just,
Mm-hmm.
we didn't get a lot of, we certainly didn't get a debrief.
Right.
But like the people that did reach out, like you were saying, it, it was like it was really nice. It was really nice to feel like somebody actually cared for
Right.
those very few who did reach out.
Right. And that somebody had the same feeling,
Yeah.
the same, oh shit moment, or understood that you had that because they've had it before, or, whatever it is. But yeah, and it's weird how it's not real, but it is real. And you're just crazy. And I think people also don't, sometimes people on the street, people that don't sit in dispatch, don't feel like we care that much, or
Mm.
that it, you know, um, and so that's part of it. But yeah, just that active, hey, can you believe that? That shit
Yeah.
happened? Oh my God. And we were, the firefighter lived, it, he's still a firefighter, and everything ended up working out, even though it was really sketchy when it was going down. So yeah, and I feel like a lot of times those balls get dropped, and then they definitely get dropped in the day to day with,
You know, I going back to what you were saying and asking about like on the floor what could be needed. I definitely, and again, education for absolute certainty, education. But I think, and again, we were kind of circling back to everything we were talking about, but on the floor, I think we need more um, dispatchers trained to help other dispatchers in
yes,
times of crisis. I think that would absolutely be, and I'm not talking critical incident stress management for those who
right,
know about that.
right. Let's
I'm
take
not
a
just
walk,
talking.
get some water. Right.
I'm talking about real life, non like this, because this is life. This isn't necessarily dispatching. Like we're talking about people who are going. So, just kind of like a personal standpoint, before I had an animal, because I don't have children, but before I had an animal calls did not bother me. I took them and I was fine. Ever since having a dog, I know this is kind of bizarre, but I care so much about these animal calls. Like I change, and that's a life thing. It's not dispatching, it's a life thing. And same thing for those who have babies. Like it's if you take those phone calls, you need somebody to walk you through what's going on because you can't process what's happening. I think our family members around us in the dispatch center need to be trained to understand what other people, like when people are experiencing trauma and when, when you need to talk about it. Because again, we're not talking necessarily dispatching, we're talking real life stuff here. This is a conversation that needs to continue. And I think having people trained on the floor to deal with that would be beneficial.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think going back while you're saying that, I was thinking going back to like the Mayday or the critical events like that. Like, I don't know about you guys, but if I hear, my husband will listen to firefighter podcasts all day long or radio traffic, he'll just pull up some random Detroit in the middle of the night and just sit there. He'll be listening to it. I'm like, what are you doing, dude? Anyway. But man, or like sometimes he'll pull up like Maydays from other agencies or whatever. And just to hear that and like hear that sound in that dispatcher's voice, I'm like, boom, right back there. Like, I know, girl. And I shouldn't say girl because there are men out there, but
yes,
like, I know. Like, and but is anybody sitting there with you going, and of course, sometimes it happens and there's only 4 people in the room and you're fucked and you're by yourself. But but at least afterwards, I had great support. I had 3 other people who were like, holy shit, that just happened to us. So I think it is critical, like just almost, I don't want to, dumbing it down. I mean, and that's maybe not the right phrase, but making it part of the scene, part of the comm center, not just critical incident stress management. Please reach
an
out
afterthought. Yeah, an afterthought. Right. It's definitely, and I say cheesy, I say these words, but I say that because we are who we are. We're dispatchers. We have dark humor. We think it's silly, but it's not. It's not. It's just it's a legit, real situation that's happening within our lives. And Casey, I'm so happy that you figured out, to get out, because it took me a while, and then
it was a hard decision.
Well, I've been out of the game since 2018. So, and for you to say, when you were saying how things are coming back up, it took a while for me too. And obviously I don't have nearly as many years as you do, but it took a while for me as well. But when you talk about it, you continue to have the conversation, it gets better.
It does. And my mom, she told me for years before, she's like, that job's too much for you. You need to find something else. But that was all I knew,
right.
15, 16 years, no, like I'm too old to be finding something else. Like I'm not going to start over. But then for whatever reason, I decided to roll with it. And here I am. I'm happy as damn pig and shit.
And I am happy that you found a therapist that you could work with, because that's a hard thing. And I have a friend, maybe we can get her on one time. She is actually a doctor, PhD doctor in psychology, and does work with public safety people. She and I are kindred spirits for a reason. But, I've heard stories of people going in and talking to the therapist, or like meeting a new therapist and telling them stuff. And then the therapist is like crying. And they're like, oh, this is the worst shit I've heard. Oh, well, that doesn't help me. Right? Like, okay, moving on. And like you said, with, people on these teams, like, is it somebody you can trust? You know, people within your department, do you really want to trust them if you don't know them?
Right.
Or maybe you know them too well.
I was just thinking that.
And then, but if you get like say in these bigger incidents, you get a state team that comes in. Well, do you want to trust them? Because you definitely don't know them. So finding that right balance of who you can talk to and not feel like you're being judged or there's peer pressure to do this, that, or the other thing. And whether or not, you know, people on these teams or supervisors in the comm center, they can always say, oh, you can get up anytime you want, or you can do, or you come on now.
Cue the face.
Right.
Cue the face.
Just eye roll emoji all day. You know, I mean,
and that's another thing. I think enough with like trying to make people happy in the dispatch center with these little pizza parties or like these coffees and all this stuff. How about we take that money and we put it towards an actual therapist for the center? You know, put it towards some good use. And I know like therapy is not for anybody, and I've learned quite a lot that you can't force anyone into therapy. They actually have to physically go themselves. And even if it's just to sit there, you can't force anyone. However, I think if the option is there, it should stay. It should be at least have the option is what I'm going to say is have that opportunity to talk and have that safe space, because the trust and seeing somebody on a daily basis, or even somebody you know maybe a little too well, you may not feel comfortable to talk about your issues.
Right.
So I really, again, in case, I think that's fantastic that you seriously found somebody that you can actually talk to.
Thanks. Yeah.
It's so hard for somebody to understand what anybody's been through when it comes to dispatchers.
Well, and I wasn't sure. I was like, this is going to be a waste of my time. And like, you know, because I can sit and talk to my mom about shit all the time. And of course, that's one person that I trust forwards, backwards, upside down. Like, but it's like she didn't quite get it. And I didn't want to like stress her out either, because she's too close to me to, you know what I mean? And she knows all the right things to say because she's mom, right?
Right.
And this lady that I go to, oh my God, she's so fucking hardcore. Like, she will tell me, like, look, bitch, no, you need to this, and that. And like, I'm like, whoa, okay. But it's shit that I already knew or know.
Right.
But to hear somebody else that doesn't know me from Adam, I'm like, whoa, okay.
Right.
So there's a couple of things I've taken out of this that's been really
wouldn't
good.
It be cool? Like, I remember, you know, when I was dealing with my ex-husband, I remember, you know, the psychologist telling me stuff, and I'm like, holy shit, I didn't know. And then a family friend, he had bad PTSD. And it was really interesting though. So segue, when my ex-husband, when we had gone to visit my parents, and my dad was helping to coach a football team at the high school, and my ex had played football, was usually very into football, and a couple of the coaches knew him and everything, and we went over there, and one of the guys was he's retired, but he's actually still active reserves, and this was early 2000s, so Middle East time. And he came up to my dad after we left. He came up to my dad and he told my dad that he's got PTSD. I think he actually said some old-timey word, you know, shell shocked or something like that. But he told him that, and my dad was like, what? And he's like, yeah. And so like that was when because we knew something was off, we just didn't know what. And my dad, you know, I mean, I think my dad, I was lucky to have the parents I have. My dad was a pilot. He came, you know, he did have friends that he was in the first Gulf War. He had friends that were POWs in the first Gulf War. But I think his community and the squadron and that being a pilot, such a tight-knit group. And, you know, I think that just helps, you know, like that just kind of. And so growing up in that environment really helped me. But we didn't know all those things. Like, we didn't know. And my husband went to a conference a couple years ago, and a guy who was a firefighter spoke, and he had tons of trauma over his career. I mean, like, he had a good friend who died in a Mayday in a fire that he was in. Then he himself was caught in a Mayday situation, almost died, but they got him out. Like, it was this guy, I mean, like, you're like, oh my God. His wife was a nurse. And so she like picked up on what was happening and was like, she's like, I need to go to work to pick up something. And what she actually did was took his ass to the psych ward and had him ECO'd. But but later, like several years later, he's still on the job. There's other things happening. And they were supposed to be going on vacation somewhere. And he was like, yeah, I'm just sitting there driving. He's like, I hadn't even really had any negative thoughts. Like, to me, I didn't even notice anything. But he said something weird to his wife. Like, I think maybe they were going to Nashville, and he was like, oh, I'd really like to see Elvis's basement or some crazy shit like that. Or like, see him playing a guitar with so-and-so, some other dead guy. And the wife's like, oh, back to the psych ward you go, buddy. And like took him back.
Jeez.
And like, he's like, that's essentially what saved my life both times. Like, but most of our families don't know that. And like,
Yeah.
if your family isn't in it, you don't want to stress them out. So how do you educate them to know these are the things you need to look for? And we should do that. We should do that. It's a family. We should do that.
Yep. Absolutely.
I know when my dad growing up, and maybe the military has changed a lot since then, but I mean, back then, gosh, I mean, the wives were always, I say wives because it was mostly men back then. The family support groups were there, and they were active. And that's just not something that you see today, and not in public safety as much as I think in the military, and probably in different aspects of the military, it's different, but
yeah, the military still has stuff like that. They definitely have options.
yeah.
So we have like what's called ombudsman for the Coast Guard, and the
Right.
wives or the husbands even come in and they talk and help, and they do everything, and it's nice. But you're right. There's really nothing for public safety.
No.
Nothing that's I guess well known. Of course there are, for the people in the, like, for the public, there's therapy and there's like discussions and like stuff like that. But in like actual public safety, it's like
Right.
taboo. What
Right.
is this? What is help? What is help?
Right.
In-
I don't need help.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've got
Right.
this.
Right. And sometimes you do have, it's like momming.
Mm.
And or even, having your little dog. Like, sometimes I can do this shit on my own. I can take Maxwell out 5 times a day to pee, but I don't want to have to.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Amen. No,
if you have other people in your family, then you're like, it's nice to have help. Doesn't mean I need it, but it's nice to have it.
Right.
I also think, and again, this can be another discussion for another podcast, but burnout, and talking about the warning signs again, kind of like what you were talking about with your friend whose wife was like, we're going, like finding the triggers even within ourselves to be like, whoa, let's take a step back and see what's going on with me to really understand what's happening. It takes a lot to do that. I mean, it takes a lot for somebody to actually find that kind of fault within themselves because they really don't want to. It makes them psychologically, it makes them feel weaker, but they're not. That's actually a strength. It's an incredible strength to find that.
It is. And I think it's because we're not taught. Like, I mean, we're taught in basic biology class how our bodies work and da 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 da. But if we were taught, how the hormones, the stress responses, how all of that was nature it happens. It's natural. We can't control it. And then, so noticing that it's happening is actually an awareness, is a self-awareness. And that is a skill. And that does make you stronger. And probably 2020 was when I started working more hours again because my youngest was 2. And I had to step way back because I knew from just the climate in there and the attitudes, and I'm like, oh, I'm taking this home with me. And I'm like on the Facebook, I'm wanting to like be in Facebook arguments with people and I'm like, no, I can't. Like, I don't want that to be part of my life, So yeah, but I have done a lot of research on this. I research it for my horse business as well. It's something that I've learned, but it's not something that's taught to us.
Definitely not.
We've decided that we need to educate people.
Yes, indeed.
So we can definitely have another podcast or 2 or whatever.
Yep. Well, we'll definitely have Emmalie back on again.
Yeah.
Sadly,
thank you. I appreciate that.
Sadly, this episode though has come to an end. So I do have a couple, like 2 shout outs this time. One is to my mom, and I know that's silly, but she's been a great supporter so far, and she's always asking, when's it coming out? When's the next episode? And she's so proud of us for doing this. And so I want to give a shout out to her, and hugs and kisses, Mom.
I want to give a shout out to Bree for letting us have Emmalie.
Oh, yes.
Like an hour and a half now.
Yes.
So, yeah. And Maxwell too.
But, yes, thanks, Maxwell.
Guys. Yeah. And my nephew, Alex, who listens to us from Hawaii. So, aloha, nice. Sabrino.
Aloha.
Yes. Yeah. So we want everyone to tune in next Thursday for, of course, another amazing episode. We're going to touch back on the different types of comm centers and talk a little bit more into the mental health. We will definitely talk with Emmalie again to have her back on, because this is something that we could sit and talk about all day and night. And we want to make sure that the listeners continue to listen, share, follow on all the platforms, and tell everyone about us. And don't forget to write into us at podcast911delta@yahoo.com. And I want to thank all of our first responders. You guys rock. Emmalie, thank you again so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It means a lot, and I love this platform to be able to talk about this. And like you said, there's so much more to talk about. This really is 90% of dispatching. It's just dealing with stress and mental health, and it needs to be talked about. So thank you guys again.
Absolutely. And until next time, guys.
All right. Bye.
Who would have ever thought it would come to this?